Page Ein Hey, second paragraph, starting with the word Ach. Ach Ata. Mosar Hashem Yisale Shtei Avodos B'Yad Odom. God gave two commandments, two mitzvos, to people. Hoechas Avodaso. The one is his service. V'hashenis Avodas HaTorah. The second is the service of the Torah. Avodaso, perhaps what he means is the things that he was talking about earlier, which is the needs that people have, or the effort that God decreed people have to expend in order to take care of their needs. So here he probably means avodaso in connection with what we saw the paragraph that we ended off with yesterday, the previous paragraph just prior to this, where he says a person should have a combination of Torah and derech eretz. So therefore, there are these two realms, these two planes of activity that people operate on. The one is the plane of his own work, meaning the things that he has to do to procure his needs. And the second one is avodas Torah, the service having to do with Torah, which include prayer as well. Even though often avoda is a term that uses to refer to prayer as opposed to Torah, which is limud, still here what I think he means is avodaso, meaning the work that he has to do to take care of his needs. And secondly, the avodas Hashem, which would be included in avodas Torah, which would be including prayer as well. Avodas Torah. V'tzorich ha'adam li'yos memutza ben shtei ha'avodos. A person has to be somewhere in the middle of these two planes of service. Uliyachet sha'os miyuchados la'avodas Torah v'la'avodas olam hazeh, and to designate specific hours for Torah study, or not Torah study, the service of Torah, which would include learning Torah, davening, mitzvos, things having to do with Torah observance. And the second period of day, another time during the day, which is designated towards his work, the things that he does to support himself and to take care of his needs. Yeah.
I have a question. Isn't the ideal where you are, in a way, combining the two and infusing what you do for your livelihood or what you do in your mundane existence with spirituality, rather than keeping the two separated into their own worlds?
Yeah, I was going to elaborate on that a little more, and that's a point that I was going to discuss. So let's finish off this paragraph and then try and elaborate on that. That's a good point. But tzarich shetischazek shetase avodas shtehen leolam letoiv lecha ulachrisecha. A person has to work very hard then on doing both of these things in order that it will be good for a person in this world and also in the next. One should not be at the expense of the other, implying that each should complement the other. Commotion Emars, it says, Ovicha haloi ochal v'shosa v'osa mishpat u'tzedakah az toivloi. So it says, Ovicha, your father, haloi ochal v'shosa v'osa mishpat u'tzedakah, he ate and drank, and he did righteousness, az tovlo, then it was good for him. Meaning a person has to do, which is procuring his physical needs, corresponding here to the verse's reference of eating and drinking, but also the spiritual needs corresponding to the Osei Mishpat, doing justice. V'omer, and furthermore the pasuk says, Toiv asher te'echoz bazeh, v'gam mizeh, al tenachis yodecha. It's good, tov, asher te'echoz, taking hold of bazeh, this, v'gam mizeh, and also from that, al tenach yodecha, don't withhold your hands, meaning the understanding of this verse should be that a person should have his hand in both things. He should have his hand in mundane affairs and also have a hand in spiritual things. So generally what this means is, for most people, on a simple level, you have a certain period of your life, let's say on a daily basis, a certain period of your day, which is dedicated to primarily, let's say, Torah type of pursuits, and other parts of the day, which is designated to more mundane pursuits. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be blocked off like a half a day for this, a half a day like this. It could be an hour or two of this, another hour or two of that, another hour or two of this, another hour or two, right? It could be alternating. That's how it is for most people. You wake up in the morning and you spend the first hour or two involved in davening. And then some people, if they can, will learn a little bit after the davening, but go to work. Others who can't learn immediately after davening and have to go straight to work will then work. Sometime during the day, it would be nice if they were able to hear a shiur, listen to a tape, maybe on their way to work, if they drive or commute, be able to listen, or have a harusa, right? Different types of things. Then you work, come home, have a shiur, again, learn a bit with your children, so forth and so on. So your day would be interspersed a little bit with mundane things, a little bit interspersed with the type of spiritual pursuits. But ideally, a person's life is not intended to be segmented so strictly, so that the parameters are holy versus profane. And when I'm involved in something mundane, I should not be involved in something holy. And when I'm something holy, it really is not like that, because of course the Torah is supposed to be something which is very holistic and integrated into everything that you do. So that clearly, let's say, for example, the person who starts his day in a way which is designated primarily to spirituality, holiness, he's davening. But in the davening itself, he's certainly making reference to his mundane deeds. In the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei itself, he's asking God for health and for livelihood and many different types of things. So of course there's an intermingling of his mundane concerns within his interest in holy things. The same thing should be in the other way around, which is when a person is involved in something which is primarily mundane, it should nevertheless be infused with the spirit of the Torah content. So we've mentioned here in the past, I think it was in this class, things like, yes, it was just yesterday, wasn't it? When we spoke about how one of the reasons why God creates us to have mundane needs is so that we should be able to fulfill more mitzvos, the types that would apply to mundane activities, like working and earning a fair buck, and not cheating or stealing, or for example, tithing. Yeah, so that these would be examples of infusing the mundane with the spiritual. They go hand in hand. Okay? So it's true that generally speaking, certain activities are generally mundane, others are generally spiritual. But the reason why we do both is to have a balance, and there should be a healthy integration or intermingling of the one with the other. I think that's part of the point that that Dimitri was making. So this is the happy balance for most people. Now, where each person falls somewhere in the middle, that's a personal thing. Some people might desire and be able to dedicate more of their time to, let's say, the more generally spiritual types of pursuits. Not everybody has the luxury to do that type of a thing. There might be plenty of people who would like to spend all of their day learning, but they can't afford to do that. They have to support themselves, they might have to support others as well. So they have no other choice but to take time away from their studies and to be involved in earning some type of a living. Other people might be able to do that to a greater degree. So that's a highly individualized thing. Every person has to decide what they are able to do, what they're able to do, what they want to do, and what they're able to do. And that's going to be a different choice for different types of people. But certainly, it's the most healthy thing to have some type of a balance between the two areas. Sometimes it gets to a point where a person must work in order to support himself or others. And what a wonderful thing if his work was in something that involves Torah, so that he actually is simultaneously able to do both things. He's working and helping and contributing to others, but he's simultaneously involved in things having to do with Torah study and prayer and the mitzvos and things like that. Yeah, so that would be that would be an ideal. Unfortunately, that can't be done by everybody either, right? I think Mordechai, you're a scribe, aren't you? A sofer? Huh? No. Not when you were being modest. What? A sheikhet. He's a sheikhet. He was a sheikhet. Yeah. So here's a situation where a person can get a parnasa, a livelihood, through something which is nevertheless part of Torah service. Yeah, and other people learn safrus and so forth and so on. Were you raising your hand?
Yeah. Are you really allowed to do that? I'm saying, like, in certain cases, I know back where I'm from, sometimes there would be very big rabbis that would charge to speak, sometimes there would be rabbis that wouldn't charge.
Yeah.
I don't know, I remember in the beginning, I guess, you guys call it Baal Tshuva syndrome, I guess, but I was like, why would rabbis charge? Like, why would they charge to speak? And then someone told me, like, listen, this is how they make their money, they need to, I was like, but they're doing, like, what Hashem wants them to do. Like,
yeah, it's a good question.
There's somewhere in the Torah where it says that, in the Torah somewhere, I guess in the Orchot, it says that you're not supposed to get any benefit from your Torah.
Yeah. I was hoping nobody would ask that question. No, it's a very good question. like, how did you put it? Should the rabbi get money for teaching Torah? No, of course not. Rabbis don't need to eat. And the children don't need to eat either. It's all miraculous. Since they teach Torah, I know their needs are taken care of. On the other hand, as you say, you're really not allowed to take Torah money for your Torah. You're not allowed to do that. He's raising a very good point. So how do you justify? How can you justify being paid to teach Torah? Were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I think I saw in Pirkei Avot, it says that he's taking money because he could be somewhere else right now making money, but he's taking his time to do it, so it's a replacement.
Exactly. Yeah. This topic would come up in Pirkei Avos, and that specific explanation is not mentioned explicitly, but I'm sure if you read or you're in a shir, that's a comment that would be made. Yeah, that's a very good question that you're answering. How can a person take money for Torah? You're not allowed to do so. On the other hand, people who are in Torah also need to survive. So how do you reconcile that? And the answer is the main answer is what Emmanuel suggested, which is that the Gemara discusses this and says that if a person takes money for teaching Torah, he's not being paid for the teaching. He's being compensated for his time, for the time he invested in learning. It's kind of like a loophole, but it's still a subtle point, which means that he's not really being paid to teach right now. Right? Like he said, he's being compensated for the time that he could have spent going to medical school and being a doctor and being paid very high fees. And the truth is, people do spend a lot of money, or at least insurance companies pay a lot of money for doctors to heal other people. And insofar as rabbis are involved in spiritual cardiology, there's no right reason why they shouldn't be receiving, a 50th of what doctors do. So, what's that?
Copay.
Copay? What is that called?
That's the term. Like when you have insurance, and
Yeah.
you pay $20.
Oh, yeah.
Insurance covers the rest.
Oh, yeah.
$20 goes to the.
Oh, the copay. So I'm saying, here, the rabbi's salary is probably, like I said, maybe a 50th of a doctor's salary. But in any case, however amount it is, you're right that a person is not supposed to receive money for Torah, and the loophole that's applied here is that it's compensation but not pay.
I was talking about something a little bit different, but maybe it applies as well. I was talking about, that I understand, the person doesn't have a day job, so therefore his day job is to teach. He goes to yeshiva, to rabbi. I was talking more people that are like
Lecturers?
Public speakers. They come, they speak. Yeah, I guess lecturers.
Yeah, but they also
they speak for 1 hour, 2 hours, and sometimes I heard that they can take a lot of money.
Yeah. So again, every situation is different, and there are probably altruistic people who say, I have another job, or I don't need the money for speaking, and it's a great merit to be able to. It's a great merit to be able to speak publicly in Torah and strengthen other people and so forth and so on. And the schar mitzvah, the reward here is the mitzvah itself. I don't want to take money. Another person might say, I wish I could afford to take that position, but I can't afford to take that position. I need the money, and therefore it can vary from situation to situation. But it's a common question, and a similar version of this is like shidduchim. Shidduchim, matchmaking. Should a person take money for matchmaking? What a wonderful opportunity, a mitzvah of bringing, a Jewish boy and a Jewish girl together for the purpose of marriage and fulfilling the first mitzvah in the Torah and so forth and so on. To take money for such a thing seems, strange. And talk about the Baal Tshuva syndrome. I remember the first time I was kind of presented with this idea, it seemed very strange to me. And I couldn't imagine why anybody would do such a thing. Since then, I've become religious, so I can understand, of course, you should take money. But, ultimately it comes down to the fact that people put a lot of time and a lot of time and effort and even money into trying to think about and make these things work and so forth and so on. And often it's at the expense of time that they could give to their spouse or their children or do other things. And so, yes, it's not so much that they're being paid for the shidduch, they're being compensated for the time they put into it. And therefore it's two different things. The money is a compensation for the time, and the mitzvah is the mitzvah. It's two separate things. They're not necessarily contradictory. Yeah.
It's like also like a rabbi who works on Shabbos. He gets incorporated in his whole job. Some people say they think he's working on Shabbos.
Yeah, that's right. That's
during
right.
the week too. I mean,
Yeah, this question is kind of relevant to situations where people are, let's say, working on Shabbos. So you're not allowed to be paid for work on Shabbos. And the idea is that again, the pay that as it were for what you're doing on Shabbos is really kind of figured in as extra pay for what you do during the week. I'm not being paid for Shabbos. I'm being paid extra for what I do during the week. And I'm volunteering my time on Shabbos. It's kind of related. But in any case, these would be different types of scenarios where we're balancing, where a person's... Were you going to say something, Jeremy?
Yeah, I had a question. Like if you were to be like a guest speaker somewhere, but you told them, like for instance, say you work at a school. So if they wanted you to be a guest speaker, and you say, well, donate to my school, and the school had it arranged to take care of your expenses and give you some kind of amount of money for a trip like that. Like, how far can you go with, like, kind of getting paid to do something like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, a person does have a right, to be, asked to be paid, outright, explicitly for what he's doing. Although what I've explained is that that's really a compensation for the preparation for that class. So certainly he could ask for that. You're asking an interesting question. I've never thought about it, but it seems logical that the quote unquote pay could take the form of a contribution to the institution, and that does seem to happen. People will speak and give to the institution. What the institution does with that money is already up to the institution and whatever arrangement they make between the institution and the speaker. Sure, I mean you have all types of promotional speeches. A speaker will come and speak, and people, will contribute, and the evening might bring in $10,000. That's really going to the institution. They'll pay the rabbi his part, but it's really for the institution. A person, what's your name? Shinav. Yeah, Shinav is asking, a very important, relevant, and penetrating question, and a person who does, rely on the permission, as it were, to take money in this indirect form for teaching, has to be very careful and sensitive to guard himself from that dynamic, creating his situation, his teaching, to be, as it were, lahavdil, like any other job. Where now you're not doing it for the Torah, you're doing it for the money, right? You're not doing it for the mitzvah, you're doing it for the tangible benefit, and therefore, it's a delicate line, a really delicate line, which is probably one of the main reasons why we're discouraged from taking money for Torah, because it shouldn't be like a mundane commodity that has some monetary value ascribed to it. It's valueless. And you run into all types of problems when you start taking money for Torah. So Shinhav is making a very, very important point. According to that, arguably perhaps it would be better to get a quote-unquote regular job that anyway hopefully will pay regularly and pay well, and then whatever time you have left for Torah is free of all of these possible, conflicts of interest and being tainted with these types of considerations and so forth and so on. Yeah.
According to the Rambam, says that no?
Say what?
The Rambam has like that type of instruction.
That what?
That a person should work. That a man should support his family.
That's not only the Rambam. That's the Torah position. Yes, that a person is required to work and support himself and his family, and only to the extent that's necessary, above which time he should spend in more primarily spiritual pursuits. On the other hand, the Rambam also mentions that just like in times of old, there was a complete tribe, the tribe of Levi, which was freed from the need to work, and they were supported by the other tribes, and this was for the purpose of being the Torah scholar tribe. So nowadays you have a situation where a person can make himself like a Levi, even if he's not, by separating himself entirely from mundane affairs as much as possible and dedicating himself as purely and wholeheartedly to Torah as possible. This is not for everybody, the Rambam says, but anybody whose heart sincerely moves him to do such a thing, he is allowed to do that. He's allowed to do that. But he's got to be honest with himself. It can't be because he's trying to shirk responsibility and he's just lazy and a loafer. No, it's talking about somebody who's going to sacrifice his days and his nights all for God and for the Torah and work very hard at becoming as much as a righteous and holy person as possible. But that would only be for the exception. That would only be an exception. The general rule is that a person, as we're saying here, a person has to have a balance between the two. Where that balance lies, somewhere between the two extremes, is going to be an individual decision based on many different factors, which vary from person to person. V'tzarek sheyiftach, page Ein Hey, last paragraph. V'tzarek sheyiftach b'shem yisbarach sheyitzlicheu b'melachtoi uve'asakov. Once a person does take the time off from formal spiritual pursuits, and he's engaged in the mundane matters of this world, including earning a living and so forth and so on, he has to pray to God for success. And this would be an example of what Dimitri was suggesting, that the separation is not so complete. Clearly, even when you're involved in mundane things, you should be looking for opportunities to infuse them with the spiritual component. In this case, praying to God for your success and what you're going to do. And he shouldn't trust himself in his business. He should rather view his working as a venue to receive the parnasa, the livelihood, which is coming from Hashem. And this is the reason behind the idea of, therefore, whether he works a little or works a lot, or whether he works in a profession which is considered to be lucrative or not, ultimately it's only a venue through which to receive the bounty which has been appointed to him by Hashem, and therefore these other things don't make so much of a difference. Like a person who chops wood, he's a wood chopper. Even though it's the physical quality of the axe blade to cut through wood, the energy to do so is not coming from the actual iron of the blade, whereas rather it's coming from the energy the person, right, asserts into the cutting. And therefore, a person who has a job or a trade or whatever it may be, through which he supports himself, he shouldn't think, without that work, everything would be lost. That's not true, because it's not the blade that cuts, it's the energy behind it. And therefore, whether your blade is that of law, or whether your blade is that of a surgeon, or whether your blade is that of a woodcutter, or whether it's that of an electrician, or whatever the case may be, whatever the tool of your trade may be, it's not the tool of the trade itself, which is making your livelihood. It's the power which is being wielded behind that. That's Hashem. That's Hashem. Rather, he should trust in God. If it weren't this, it will be something else. So Hashem will orchestrate it that his money will come from a different source, because it's coming from Hashem. And therefore, the way it comes is really not so much of a difference. Of course, a person has to make an effort that it's coming in as effortless way as possible, not because he wants to be lazy and a loafer, because he wants to have time free to follow spiritual pursuits. And also, of course, he has to do his best to make sure that it's coming through a permitted way and not a non-permitted way. But ultimately, if it's coming through a legitimate way, it doesn't really matter so much if it's through way A, B, or C, because it's got to come. It's funny, it's like the other day, there was a certain situation where a person, it seems to me, was the cause of my losing, for me, what's a considerate amount of money. And ultimately, I couldn't find an accommodation or solution with this person directly. So we went to Beis Din. I've never been actually to Beis Din. I mean, I've actually sued a person to go to Beis Din. In this scenario, for the first time in my life, unfortunately, I had to go to Beis Din and, present this dispute between the two of us to the rabbis, the court, and for the decision. And the court decided against me, not in my favor. The decision of the Beis Din was that it was not enough convincing evidence for my claim, and therefore the person could not be held responsible for what I consider to be the loss that he caused me. In any case, the next day I got a phone call. The very next day I got a phone call from an office that I had made an application to very long ago, in terms of getting some monetary whatever, and it looks very, and I don't know exactly the numbers, but it looks pretty much like what I lost here I'm going to get there. So I'm breaking even. Hopefully I'll break even. In other words, I guess I wasn't supposed to lose that, and if it was determined I lost it in this direction, so it was going to be compensated elsewhere, or maybe I wasn't supposed to get that, so it had to be taken elsewhere. In other words, I don't know, the heshbon, but everything is all perfectly orchestrated so that a person gets exactly what they deserve, for good or for bad. And you have to see that the hand of Hashem in everything. For harbe shluchim lamakom, there are many venues through it for God to execute His will. As it says in the verse, Ki en Hashem matzor lo shia borav o b'mat. There's nothing to prevent God from saving, whether with a little or with a lot. Right? There's nothing to stand in God's way. Here it's talking about the verse in the Torah says, beware when you come in the land, I'll give you bounty and blessing. Yeah, lest you say, my hand and the strength of my arm brought me all of these things. No, a person shouldn't think that. Why? Because God is the one who gives you the energy to do these things. Is a term which is referring to people's natural inclination to say, I did this, I earned it, I achieved it, I did it, so forth and so on. And what the Torah is saying is, beware lest through all the bounty and blessing God gives you when you're brought into the land, that you think, I'm the one who did this. I planted the vineyards. I set up the industry. Right? I designed the artillery. I learned how to aim it. And all this other stuff. Right? Because you have to remember the most important ingredient is that God gave you the energy, the ability to do all of those things. Yes, and therefore, it would be nice if more often, for example, in Israel, you heard politicians or military personnel saying, thank God we were successful in doing this. Or, yes, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will be able to do that. You have to give credit where credit is due, and people have put a lot of effort into all types of things. But ultimately, we have to give thanks and recognition to Hashem for the ability to do that as well. And therefore it says, at the end of this paragraph, Lo b'chayav v'lo b'choyach ki im beruchi omar Hashem tzvukos. A person cannot ultimately achieve what they want through strength and through fortitude, but rather through my spirit, God says. Because you can push hard and hard and hard and hard, but if that's not what Hashem wants, it's like banging your head against the wall. Ultimately, it's through the spirit of Hashem that we succeed. And that's also an important point, particularly in these days where unfortunately there's conflict and confrontation again, and we find military, involved and embroiled in this contest with the terrorists again. Hashem Yazor. So we have to remember that our strength is not only in our army, but it should also primarily be, with the spirit of Hashem that we breathe into what we're doing. And if we explained clearly enough and with conviction enough that we're here not because we need a place to live, but because this is the land that God gave the Jewish people. We're here because God said so in the Torah, period. It's not an issue of negotiating or arguing or disagreeing with or different positions or anything like that. We're here for no other reason than God said, this land shall be for the Jewish people. And even there, it's on condition. When they deserve it, yeah, and when I deem it appropriate. So we're here, we must deserve it in some way, and it must be considered to be appropriate by God in some way. What we have to do is ensure that we continue to deserve being here, which involves not just making sure that we can oppose and overcome our enemies, but that there's a reason why we should do that. There's a purpose for that, which is to be uniquely the Jewish people, uniquely in the land of Israel. If there's nothing special about that, there's no special reason for that, then it was given to the Canaanites, and then taken from the Canaanites and given to the Israelites, and then taken from Israel and given to the Romans, and it can be taken away from us again, and so forth and so on. So the fighting spirit is not just the ability to fight, but it's also the spirit. And for us, it means the spirit of Hashem. Turn the page Ein Vav, on the very top there. And so too is somebody who all of his, let's say, needs are dependent on one person. He should not put the trust in his heart on that person. So a person who's entirely dependent on his parents, for example, at whatever age that might be, should be thankful to his parents, but recognize it's not coming from his parents. It's coming from Hashem. And his parents are not the ones who are giving it to him because they love him. They're giving it to him because Hashem has chosen them to be the venue through which he gives to this person. A person has to know that in his heart. He should only hope for the best, and there should be gesund and health and everything 120 for his parents or for other people he might be dependent on. But he has to realize ultimately, right, that his true trust and faith has to be in Hashem. Has to be in Hashem. It doesn't mean to say these people are indispensable. He shouldn't be viewing them as indispensable. He loves them, he cares for them, he wants the best for them. Right? But the point is that you have to, and sometimes Hashem will cause the source of a person's livelihood to be constricted and dry up. And that might be because he's come to put too much reliance on that person. So you might think, wow, that seems callous. He's like deflecting his recognition of his parents' role in what they're doing from him by turning it to God. But ultimately, by doing so, it's the exact opposite, because it's maintaining that level of sensitivity which will preserve his parents' right to give and his right to receive from them. Because if he were to deflect his interest from Hashem and towards his parents, ultimately that could cause his parents to lose out as well. Why? Because he's falsely putting his trust in them, and God doesn't want that. In order to wean him away from that, he can cause their help for him to be constricted, which might involve in constricting their own wealth. And therefore, he's actually going to be better off, and his parents will be better off, in this case his beneficiaries, whoever they may be, by ensuring that he's always thinking about Hashem. If he's always thinking about Hashem, then everything will work out fine. Those who Hashem has chosen to be the conduit for him will continue to receive it and receive the benefit for giving, and he'll also be able to continue to receive from them. But when he starts giving over recognition to the beneficiary, he's actually causing him and them to suffer, possibly.
So then why do we put plaques on buildings and in hallways to give us a lot of money?
So, that's a very good question. And, arguably it should not be done. When it is done, the best way to...
Money if they don't get a plaque.
That's right. So, in terms of, the recipient, my recognition is to Hashem. This person would like a plaque, so let him have a plaque. As far as what we're talking about, my recognition, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm glad that Hashem has given you this bounty, and you've chosen to use the bounty by giving it to me. Let us both be thankful and recognize that Hashem is the source of all. That's fine. If he wants the plaque, so that's between him and Hashem, right? The person who's receiving it, however, has to be careful not to be overly obsequious, because this person is giving money.
It happens a lot. You wine and dine with big donors.
Yeah.
And you go out of your way, and you'll take that phone call on Friday night because it's $2 or whatever.
I hope no Orthodox institution is doing that.
But I'm just saying, as an extreme example,
Yeah.
you'll go out of your way,
Uh-huh.
to accommodate even people who have their eccentricities.
Yeah. So you can go above and beyond what you would do for others, but not go out of your way. That would be too much. Yeah. What's considered to be a reasonable amount of respect and appreciation for what the person does. Because at the end of the day, this person is using his free will to choose to do this, and that, that should be recognized. But the point here is just that a person has to know in his heart of hearts that it's not Mr. Goldberg.
Right. It just looks that way because when you walk into a place and you see the big name,
Yeah.
gold letters, it seems like the honor is going to the individual rather.
So the plaque, in the end of the day, what's the plaque? It's a piece of bronze on the wall,
You can have a plaque to Hashem. Hashem.
Yes.
Hashem was the
Yes. So, I was going to say, when there is a plaque, then at least, it could be done more tastefully, which would be like in gratitude of Hashem, sometimes, or even if it's not anonymous, sometimes people will not necessarily put their name on, but it'll be put in the name, in the merit of, Moshe ben Chaim, of the Goldberg family of San Diego, in smaller print or something like that. But the main thing, it's like not for the recognition, it was donated for in the name of this person, that there should be some spiritual component of this donation, namely, right, but
So not Trump, right?
right, yeah. But again, that being said, as long as the institution who's receiving it recognizes where it's coming from, that would be enough as far as what we're concerning, as what we're discussing here. And how the other person views, his giving, that's up to him. But if he thinks, I do this, I do that, my name is plastered, on Jewish institutions all over the world, and therefore, the red carpet should be rolled out for me everywhere, so he has the wrong intention. If his intention is, I'm happy that my name appears on the walls of institutions across the world, because this should be an example for other people who are in my category of wealth to also do such a thing. It really doesn't matter to me that it's my name, but if it's got to have a name there, and other people using my name might be encouraged for whatever reason, even if it's only because of reason of competition, to donate themselves. So that might be a more elevated intention with this type of a thing. Yeah, I don't mind at all. In fact, I think we should probably just do that instead of finishing here because we're running out of time. Go ahead.
So, just for clarification, I'm just going to share my understanding. You can tell me if I
Go ahead.
misconstrued. So basically, I'm just wondering, the free will of the donor, how that fits in. Are we just acknowledging that it was their choice, but ultimately God was the source?
Yes, that's the point.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the point. Because a person who receives from a person regularly, and particularly if it's the only person, over time is naturally going to have an inclination to be thinking that this person is the source of my money. And what we're being encouraged to remember here is that that's not the case. God is the source of the money. This person is the agent. This person deserves recognition for exercising their free will to be that agent. But we have to be careful not to kind of delude ourselves into thinking that this person is the source of my income. Because if something, God forbid, were to happen to this person, if the money's coming to me, it'll come through another person. And therefore, the best way to ensure that everybody stays gesund is to be thinking that it's coming from Hashem and not from this person.
It's conflating cause and effect.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So let's stop here, and we'll continue B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow.